Perfect. Welcome, everybody. So let me start the timer. I've got a few gadgets here to get through, trying to do it with three hands. But thank you all for coming. And an exciting topic today, probably a little bit unusual. We don't see this too much, but trying to think about something we can add some value. We really wanted to do something that's probably not talked about too much, and that's what happens post-launch, what happens about maximising revenue. We tend to spend so much time thinking about the pre-launch and what's coming up and building for that launch, but really, most of the magic happens post-launch. It's actually, once you launch that game, you've got a different shark fin, you might have a mobile game that's sort of ramping up, you might have a humpback. It's really that post-launch where all the sales really happen. So there's a lot of considerations that go into that, and it's something we don't want to forget about because it really does need a plan as well. So for today, we've assembled a pretty amazing panel here that we'd like to go through, all local here. I'm obviously from Australia. So for those that don't know me, my name is Simon. I am the Regional VP for Xsolla. I'm based in Sydney, but I cover Australia and New Zealand. And I won't go into Xsolla, but we're a support company. We have tools and services that can help you as game developers. So we can talk about that another time, but we're very close to working with partners about what they're doing about maximising their revenue. So that's really what we want to focus on today. So using my other hand to try and do all this at once. A little bit about me. I've been in the industry quite a while now. This is year 30. So I've worked AAA, publisher side, business development, a whole lot of things. So publishing and launching games is pretty clear, dear to my heart. So, but with the panel today, I'd like to introduce everyone here. So firstly, starting with you, Andy. Tell me a little bit about yourself, Andy. And
right, yes, I can beat you. I've been in the industry 32 years now. I started as a coder. I have been a coder, a producer, I've run my own company. I've been run the design team, I've run the production team, I've done various things. Now I've got the honor of being this chief design officer at Pickpock, which means I get to manage our design team, which includes the live ops team who are working, heavily on events and everything for post-launch optimization.
Fantastic. All right.
Kia ora. Hi. My name is Ben Tucker Emerson. I've from Dinosaur Polo Club, so locally. I am the product marketing manager here, and gosh, I've only been in the industry for about 3 years, but prior to that was working in arts and events, arts festivals, music festivals, so I have loved the switch over here. Yeah.
Fantastic. And next?
Kia ora tātou. I'm Stephen Knightley. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Rocketworks in Auckland. And as a case study to use today, we have a PC survival game called Icarus that we launched in 2021. But in order to be prepared for today, we decided we'd update it every single week. So today we're about to publish the week 200 update. And we decided to get some data that we could use today that we'd make it the daily deal on Steam's homepage yesterday. So Icarus is currently 80% off on the Steam homepage. So just thought I'd do that. So I got some current data. Awesome.
Fantastic.
Go buy Icarus. It's 80%
Go buy Icarus.
Steam. Daily deal today.
And next?
And I'm Sam. I'm one of the co-founders of Digital Confectioners. We've focused principally on multiplayer games and PC and worked on a whole lot of games, everything from tiny games that no one would have heard of up to Fortnite. But haven't shipped a game for a while. Last game was Dread Hunger, which did well. But we're working on new titles now.
That's fantastic. And Steve, you brought up a good point there about what game we should focus on. That was something I wanted to check, is obviously we have a few of you sort of focusing on mobile right now, a few on PC, some of you have worked on both. Is there any games we should sort of just have in mind today that help, I guess, think this conversation about optimizing revenue? Obviously, Icarus is a fantastic example, but yeah, Andy, what comes to your head?
Well, from Pickpock's standpoint, we've got, as you say, we've got games both on Steam and on mobile. Primarily we're mobile, but we've got recent learnings from our work on Steam with Into the Dead Darkest Days, as well as probably our biggest live ops success, which is our Rival Stars horse racing title, which is on both, actually. It's a free-to-play title on mobile and a premium title on PC, so we've had a sort of different marketing strategy across both. So I will probably chip into bits of those.
Perfect. That's great. Ben?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose from my perspective and the context of what I'll speak to today, I was speaking to our two games out at the moment, which is Mini Metro and Mini Motorways. I suppose through the lens, again, talking to what I'll bring to this panel is probably focusing on our strategies and tactics and whatnot and insights we've got from Apple Arcade, the App Store, Steam, and Switch.
Perfect.
Mostly Depth, which is a older PC multiplayer game that we released in 2014, and we supported that for, well, we still support it, but are not doing content anymore, but we're still selling it. And then a few games since then, and the new games that we're working on now, which we're working through a lot of the strategy for.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about this earlier today, Sam, but yeah, Depth, I mean, over a decade and it's still going. And especially if you're not doing content updates, which is an interesting point in itself. But yeah, that's certainly the evergreen tale that we're hoping for. And certainly that takes some planning. I mean, there's some luck in there, but that's planning. So fantastic. So, all right. That's great. Thank you for the introductions, everyone. So we'll try and get in the meat of this. And as I was saying before, I think it's really about having a plan. And I know I could be wrong, but it feels like for many studios, they're so focused on that launch that often they're not thinking about the longer tail and what happens after that amazing success. It's going to skyrocket for them. So I think really it'd be good to dive into, well, just what other things we can think about, what things can we pre-plan for, what has worked, and we'll try and talk about a few of those, keeping in mind that obviously mobile and PC are quite different, but there probably is still some similarities, but we'll try and talk through a few of those. So sort of jumping in, and I might start with you, Andy, here first then. So I guess the first thing is kind of where do we start? It's a big question, but it's probably really about what can you actually pre-plan around, I guess, sort of that pricing, discount, and that sales strategy. Like how much can you get ready beforehand?
Lots is the short answer. I mean, I think with both mobile and PC and anything, fundamentally people are after a bargain. They're after something which is going to give them an amazing bang for their buck. The main difference is less about mobile and PC and free-to-play and premium, because with a premium, you've got your people who'll put it on their Steam wish list, and there'll be the people who are very excited about it, who will buy it regardless on launch day, and then those people who wait for the sale, and then the sale of the sale, and then the sale of the sale, and then maybe they eventually get round to it eventually when it comes in a bundle of some description. But it's all about the word of mouth and whether it's worth them spending their dollar to get it. Free to play, whether it's Fortnite or horse racing, is people can play it for free. They can feel if they like it. So you've got to hook them with the value up front. They've got, this is something I want to spend my time in. And then you offer them the value. So it's more about pricing psychology, I suppose, the classic first-time offer, which will give you some amazing deal, which is, 20% of the cost of buying the items individually. And you make it seem really enticing to the player, but they want to spend that $2-3 on doing that. And then once they've spent, and you get into the sunk cost fallacy, and they're putting a bit more time into it, and there's other things like that. So there's so much. I mean, I wrote down Nick Calender here. If I'm going to do one recommendation, if anyone's not familiar with Nick Calender with a K, he's got this fantastic blog on pricing psychology. So much free stuff to download, just of different tricks and tips to do to persuade people how what you're offering is amazing, even if it's just the same as everything else.
Excellent. And just thinking about Into the Darkness, I mean, obviously wishlists on Steam in particular were really, really strong. I mean, how much was that influencing? How much were you thinking about that conversion, for that early conversion at that price? I mean, would you be recommending keeping it high, knowing that a lot of that does convert on sale? Or does that play into it?
Yes. I mean, the thing is with any, it's always easier to drop prices and put them up later. And so we don't have an awful lot of experience with a big premium title like that on Steam. So whilst we had a lot of guidelines and a lot of recommendations from other people, there was always going to be that slight guess. Are we going out at the right price point? Are we going to appeal to people? Are we going to do those targets? So it was much easier to start where we thought was right, but on the high end of what we thought was right rather than the low end, because then you can discount it, you can do a sale, and people feel good about it.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Anyone else want to jump in there or on that one in
I
particular?
suppose like we've got premium games, right? That's kind of where we sit in Dinosaur Polo Club. And yeah, the price was always meant to be approachable, but what's moving the needle is that kind of limited time discount. So that's kind of where we see the most movement, which means pricing, you've got to factor in for knowing that you kind of will need to discount. And that might need to become your new average price in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess for you, particularly for the Motorways titles, I mean, the games are mature. It's like how often do you cycle that kind of pricing so that it doesn't get stale or expected?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
so-
staggering down a kind of how deep you go with those sales as well, right? Like taking our time with the game's maturity to not discount too deeply too soon.
Too soon.
And kind of setting expectations for the new norm.
So given that you're doing that sort of regularly, how often are you thinking about how far forward is that plan coming into place? Is it something you're planning long range, or are you sort of adapting to the market? Like what's effective?
I mean, always experimenting and always taking the data, but I mean, we try and plan about 6 months to 12 months out, kind of looking at showcases, the sale cadences that we know are coming up on Steam, especially for those major kind of annual ones.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. So pricing and discounts, I mean, it sounds like it is something we definitely need to be thinking through. It's not something you can necessarily plan all the way through. But on top of that, of course, there's also bundles and promotions. I think, Stephen, obviously that's really where Icarus has sort of shined. I mean, is there kind of a North Star of how you sort of approach that?
Yeah, so actually almost leaping back to the what do you do to plan. I mean, one is plan to have updates, plan to have DLC, because that's then what you will bundle up. And often when we're thinking about, say, designing a bundle for something, we're still trying to tailor it to the product so it makes sense with the deal that's going on. So, for instance, if we've just launched a new DLC, I mean, the bundle is buy the base game and this DLC. Or, I mean, we now have, 20 DLC, and some are the major expansions, some are optional cosmetic, some are optional exploration maps, and it can be confusing for the player. Hey, what do I get? So the bundle can help suggest to them, if you're new to the game, buy this plus these are the 2 essential DLC. And also if you want to complete the set, hey, awesome, do that. Put $200 down if you want. So they're often helpful to suggest to the customer what to buy and how to buy. And in some cases it's, solving a problem, solving a marketing problem that, for instance, the Steam storefront isn't always terribly clear in how it presents things as well.
Yep. And thinking pre-launch, how many of those bundles were you thinking through? That's a lot.
Yeah, well, actually, I'll leap back to your previous question about pricing. So, in general, game developers and indie game developers price too low. That's the temptation. So that's, I think, the thing to resist is resist pricing too low, because, as you say, you should set your price and then calculate, well, minus the, say on Steam, 10% launch discount, and then expecting that you're going to increase it over time. But actually, in the case of Icarus, we originally were going to launch with more content, and we actually made a decision. We were originally going to launch with, let's say, 2 maps at a $60 US price point, and then in the end, we did not launch with. We only launched with 1 map. And the mistake we made is we said, oh, well, therefore, let's sell the game for $30. We halved the content, we halved the price. And that was a mistake, because the value in the eyes of the player was not necessarily linked directly to that. What that meant is we were able to say, don't worry, coming soon, the DLC with the second map, because we'd always planned it and expected it. Actually, we had 3 maps that we had planned. We did at launch sell that as the deluxe edition. So we did have the plan that these 2 extra maps were coming. You could buy that as the deluxe edition. Now, that was a mistake. We changed its name after a few months to the supporters edition, because when you sell the deluxe edition, it's very much a premium offer. You're going to get this extra stuff and promising it now. Whereas the expectation when you say it's the supporters edition, and this is something that Rocketworks and a few other successful developers lean into very well, is saying, hey, buying the DLC doesn't just get you content and doesn't just get you more hours of gameplay. You are supporting the ongoing development of this project. And we find that appeal really works very strongly. And we do hear players on forums saying, I'm buying the DLC to support the project. And often in our Steam updates and news blogs, we do that appeal. Like if we are, for instance, in one of our blogs at the bottom, cross-promoting some of our other DLC, the headline is, something like support this project or your contributions support the development of this project. Like for instance, Grinding Gear games for Path of Exile have always talked about their large amount of DLC you can purchase, an amount of money you can spend on that game as supporting the project for a small, struggling indie studio in West Auckland, which is now several hundred people. So you have to have a portfolio of DLC to be able to then bundle them up and present them in a smart way.
No, that's great. And you mentioned mistakes there a couple of times. That's interesting. So was there anything in particular from those cases that sort of really set you to change course? I mean, how quickly did you see it was a mistake, and then how flexible did the studio have to be to adapt?
Interesting. Yeah. Well, we knew we'd screwed up on launch day. And I suppose that's okay, as you were saying, Eddie, you're setting this up, we all plan and prepare for launch day, but then what can you do from day one? So we had a good and a rocky launch for Icarus. So look, we hit #1 on Steam worldwide. We had a few 100,000 wish lists before launch. We had a few 100,000 pre-sales in the bag before launch. And we hit #1 on Steam and had a few 100,000 sales that launch day. But we also had a rocky reception, both some technical issues, some translation issues in China, some connectivity issues, some mismatch of expectations about the game, because actually we had a particular game mode that was very time limited, which may not have been what people expected. Within the first 2 or 3 days, the leadership made a decision. We have to regain the trust of the community. We always have to signal. We weren't doing a live service business model, but we were doing a live service production model. We had to signal, and we had to earn back the community's trust and say, stick around. And so we said, right, we are going to update this game every single week. So we hadn't made that promise or decision before launch week. We had internally talked about live service style production, and we knew one of the things I think Rocketworks is good at is regularly and frequently updating our games. But that was a decision we made to react to that. But then that's what allowed us to keep the community around for longer. We probably have a thicker, compared to some of the other games in the same genre who launched around the same time, we have far more concurrence 3 years later than they do. But it's because we adopted that kind of live service model that more content is coming, and it's that promise that more content is coming. And to quote Grinding Gear games again, Chris Wilson did a good presentation here a few years ago where what caused their player curve to actually go up permanently rather than just every now and then was when they promised that they were doing their seasons every 3 months. And you could guarantee every 3 months that a new season was coming. And therefore you had you didn't have any lost investment. What you put into this season would then be still of value the next season. And that certainty and that promise is when their curve went ever upwards.
That's great. No, thanks, Steve. That's amazing. And it sounds like that's really the DNA now of your studio, is sort of working to that cadence, and that's really worked for you. I mean, Sam, just thinking then obviously about some of your titles, I mean, obviously still longevity. I mean, it's quite a while back, but what was the strategy then around depth in terms of that launch and bundles? Because
we've, when it comes to pricing, we've always looked through 2 lenses. One is sort of the production lens of looking at your costs and looking at how the revenues will come in. And we notice particularly with indies, they tend to overestimate their revenues. They'll do something like multiply the USD RRP by number of units. That is not your revenue. So you do have to think about things like regional pricing and ask around about it. But if you assume you're going to get about a half to a third, that's probably more realistic. And that's a very production-focused thing, looking at all your costs and then what the revenues might be. But it gives you a good idea when you look at the sales numbers required as to where your pricing should be. It gives you sort of a ballpark. And the other lens that we look at it through is from the customer's point of view, and looking at comparable games, what they're buying, and what they would expect to play. It's probably the more important lens, but it's harder to get the data. But we try really hard to look at comparable games and what people are actually paying. And then you wind up with a range, and go near the top, not the bottom, because we do tend to underprice things, and it gives you a lot more flexibility. With depth, we did actually wind up raising the price because it had originally been intended as a premium game, and then we'd move on. It turned into a game as a service, and we have made the same mistake. We had underpriced it. But we wanted to keep on making content. Luckily, we were able to weather the change when we raised the price at the time. For bundles, we've done both bundles of DLC. They've worked really well. The Steam bundles are great because people can collect the set and know that they can get everything, but don't have to pay the individual pricing, which can add up to something ridiculous when your game's been out for many years. We've also done cross promotions with other developers. We've had good luck with that. There have been a number of cases of horrible examples of it, but if you've got good audience overlap between the two games and you can do stuff that respects the two IPs that cross promote, then I think that works really well as well.
Yeah, that's great.
I was going to add, we've raised the price of Icarus and also all of our game Stationeers by $5, after a year or so, just quietly. But I mean, if you have added a whole bunch of valuable content to the game, like not just more content, but new whole systems and features, and it's a better game, yeah, put your price up.
Perfect. And that leads me to a question I was going to ask about bundles in particular. You mentioned obviously cross-bundling with other devs. I mean, what success or failures does everyone have? I mean, is that something you should be looking at? And is it something that other developers approach you, or is it something you should take the lead and kind of find
Yeah, you
alignment?
should take the lead because so many developers are so introverted and just don't reach out. Yeah, it can work out well. And the other thing it's not about the sales, but the other thing that can be fun, it can just be really fun to work with another dev team and they've got like a different fresh take on your game and you've got a different take on their game, and the energy can be really fun. Give you some cool ideas for content to do together.
That's a cool point. Yeah, absolutely. And what about other platforms like Humble? I mean, is Humble Bundle still a thing? I mean, is that alternative channels that are doing bundles? Are they still come into the picture? Any thoughts?
We've never done a Humble
Never done a
bundle.
Humble
We've
bundle?
stayed away from
Yeah.
pay what you want because we don't want to underprice.
And we're the same. We have declined Humble Bundles because we want to avoid the price erosion.
Sure. No, that's a good point. Very good point. All right. Next point I'd like to talk about a little bit is probably platforms and the distribution. And I mean, thinking about, obviously, I'm not sure actually which of the titles you think about, what platforms you actually launched on, but how important was that cross-platform at launch versus staggering that? I mean, how much of that went into your planning? Which platforms you're going to launch on? Start with you, Andy, maybe there?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I should say we haven't done the sort of cross-platform in the sense that, which is common these days, where your save game works across every platform and you're playing multiplayer across people on different platforms with, as I mentioned, Rival Stars Horse Racing. That was released on console under a different name, on mobile and on PC, but they were kind of separate titles, but obviously all based on the same code base ecosystem and different things like that. I think so much of it, I mean, yes, you've got to factor in what platforms you're going to be right from the start. It affects everything. It affects the engine you choose, the controls you're using, the lot, and certainly the pricing of how your game is going to be perceived. Because if you're charging $40 for it premium and they get everything, then if it's going to cost them thousands to get everything on the mobile version eventually in a free-to-play model, you've got questions there being asked as to value. And yeah, it gets quite challenging as to how you're mixing those two up, which is why the big free-to-play titles, the Fortnites of this world, are free on everything. And that's shared across the board. I think certainly if you're going to do anything which is planning to be cross-platform play, you've obviously got to think about that right at the start. It's huge. But if you're just looking to make it available on other platforms, effectively doing ports, I don't think it's quite such a big deal.
Sure.
Yeah, so for Mini Motorways, I suppose, is the best one to talk about, because we had kind of set an expectation with our community and people with Mini Metro on what platforms they could expect it on, and we actually got into with Mini Motorways, it came to Apple Arcade as one of the launch titles, right? So there was an exclusivity period as part of that. Maybe at the time it was maybe not the ideal thing to happen, and I mean, like, being candid, the sales or kind of units downloaded weren't, fantastic and game-changing at the start. It wasn't until we actually kind of turned the Apple Arcade launch and that launch title into almost like an early access period for us to then go announce we are coming to Steam. And then a year later, we come to Steam and we saw Apple Arcade's baseline, which was probably in the tens of thousands at the time in terms of units kind of average, into the hundreds of thousands. And it set a brand new baseline for us on Apple Arcade. So launching on Steam actually turned Apple Arcade into I'm talking quadruple the amount of figures or more. And it stayed at a new high baseline for so many years. I think we're into our 6th year now with Motorways. Wow. And over 10 on Metro. The same thing with the cross-pollination, right? So launching on Steam actually benefited, with Motorways, benefited the Mini Metro title. The biggest thing for Mini Metro was launching the sequel.
That's an excellent success, because I think it is a tough question. A lot of studios aren't sure, do you launch simultaneously? Do you stagger? There's pros and cons from each. I guess there's no perfect world, but it sounded like for you, actually staggering really worked.
I mean, it's wrapped in the context of COVID, though. I have to say this. I don't know if it was lightning in a bottle, but I want to be candid and be honest about it. We must have been a launch title in 2019, and then, lockdown periods, people playing games, exploring kind of what gaming is in 2020 when you're locked inside, and then the announcement that the Steam platform launch was on the horizon, and then coming to the party with that in 2021.
Fantastic.
But yeah.
I have an alternative take, which is go off platform. The bastards just take 30%. So, for instance,
from me with Exola.
back in our launch of Icarus X years ago, we had, I suppose, just hype, but I'm sure of some of the several 100,000 pre-sales and wish lists that we sent to Steam. It was us and our marketing efforts that had generated that. So why not send it to our own website with our own payment provider, of which Zola could be one option. There you go, you get a sponsor mention thrown in. So sometimes if you're putting all that marketing effort in, why not capture it yourself?
Yeah.
That's a
well, just to add to that, I mean, obviously from my camp, we do see that. I mean, we will set up obviously direct sales side of things, and we can see the traffic, and we also see traffic come into sites, and we see this with Epic too. People will say, "Oh, I'm not going to be on Epic, but I'm on Steam," and it's like, because they'll say, "Well, I'm not going to sell much on Epic." Yes, but you'll see the newsletter from Epic go out. People see it as organic discovery, and you'll actually see traffic go from the newsletter from Epic across to Steam. So I mean, it does all add up, but yeah, it'd be perfect.
And we've experimented with listing one of our games on itch as well.
Yeah. So. Yeah, that's a good point. Because I was going to say, how much does that platform dictate your strategy? But obviously, Andy, you'd mentioned that, it's critical having that sort of beforehand. I think it's just deciding whether you're going to simultaneously launch or whether you're going to stagger. And I guess every scenario is different.
I think based on Stephen's answer, it also depends on your definition of platform here. If you're looking at it from the purposes of a payment provider, whether it's Steam or whether it's Apple doing their own unique things, either on the store or with Arcade, all sorts of things like that, it's fine. I was thinking a bit more in terms of actually what these different hardware can do, which is just changes the equation on everything. And is just something you factor in right at the start. And where you do see, you do see some great success of games going from PC to mobile, but not very often because it's very, very hard to do it well. And likewise, you do see success of games on mobile going to PC, but not very often because people go, it's a mobile game, I'm not playing that. So planning it as a simultaneous thing is something where you can use your marketing to create a story how this is, one big ecosystem and everything is wonderful and glorious and just be here.
Perfect. All right. No, that's great. And I think we touched a little bit on the pricing you get from Steam and the platforms and how much you have to consider. How much is regional pricing coming into play? Are you thinking about emerging markets as you're launching, or definitely as you get into the longer cycle? What's going through your thought processes there?
We've definitely experimented that a lot with the sort of different tier pricing you can do in different territories. You can do third tier pricing on the various app stores to make your game only cost 20 cents in Brazil or whatever it is like that. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I know we've seen big success with it. In terms of, hey, it's still money. And you're getting there. And once you've got people to, invest a little bit, then they're staying around for the longer term. As I said, you've got that sort of sunk cost fallacy that once I've spent a bit, I'm more likely to stay in the game. A lot of it, though, is also, I'm slightly extrapolating to something we're planning rather than done. But if you're getting, if a lot of your value is the size of your audience, because the size of your audience gives your paying players people to play against, then actually you can afford to have free content or cheap content in other territories, because that is actually creating a larger player base for your richer territories to play with.
As a minor counterpoint to that, you do have to know what your operational costs are, though.
Oh, yes.
If you have a game with high operational costs, you might not be able to regionally price as much, and you might have to have the difference between the rich countries and the poorer countries be much smaller. But again, that comes back to that planning period and knowing what your costs are.
Yeah, I mean, that was a good point. It was really just how much are you thinking about that going in? I mean, I know I talked to a lot of developers and they're like, well, I'm focused on the US. I'll see what happens in those other markets. It sounds like you're obviously, definitely thinking of that operational side of things as something early, but particularly for multiplayer games, it's going to be important to make sure lobbies are full and those sort of things. But still got to be cost effective with those player spends. So, all right, no, that's great. I think we talked a little bit about distribution. We've touched on a little bit about this. I think we've talked a little bit about DLCs and expansions. We've talked about the timing. It seems like there's no real perfect timing and it's sort of flexing around. But obviously with you, Stephen, and your studio, that I was saying before, the DNA of your content cadence has been really important. But what do you think new studios should be thinking about when they're planning in terms of thinking about cadence? Is there something the studio has to set up beforehand and be ready for that, even if it's not going to happen?
Yeah, so you certainly need your production process and your team and your cadence ready for it. In terms of like when you do your DLC, I mean, you need to have your audience there ready to buy it. So that's the thing. So I know maybe you should have, launch DLC. And it's interesting, the case I gave, in our case, it was a promise of pre-ordering the next 2 DLC that were coming. So that's easy to sell on day one, harder to deliver. We have not actually delivered the third part of that we've promised. It's coming out in December, or scheduled to anyway. So some people purchase something then that we had not had, we had plans to make it, but it wasn't delivered yet, 3 or 4 years later, so that's possible. And also, we did try to do that in an ethical way with updates and delivered lots of value in the meantime as well. So there's no, as you were saying, there's not, you must do a DLC within the first 6 months or 12 months or 24 months, but it's as long as you still have your community around and wanting it and demanding it. If there's people hungry for it, provide it. And that's the other thing. There's actually something that Mario said to me once, more coming from the world of mobile and internet purchases. For freemium business models, never limit the amount of money your best customer can give you. So like if you don't have DLC, people can only give you the base price. Actually, so for Icarus, you're talking about the pricing, what you actually get in hand for going into out regional pricing. So I think, it's sold for $40 US, but what we get, the average lifetime value, the value of someone who buys the base game of Icarus is about 25 New Zealand dollars. But once we introduced DLC and had DLC available, the lifetime value of an Icarus player was north of $50. So just from having it available, and at the time that they're still being a player base around, made the difference.
I think if I can again throw a slight, not a counterpoint to that. It's building on what you were done with Icarus, where you were doing these weekly updates, and you mentioned the other example of games which do seasonal content and they really promise their seasonality. That regularity can be huge, and so planning to be regular and to what people can expect. And the other thing is we've been quite reliant on, certainly in our earlier mobile days, on featuring on the app stores. And if you do updates, you can pitch for more featuring on those updates. And it's really having good liaisons, good relationships with your account managers to find out when they're going to be doing a well, I mean, the calendar ones are easy. They're going to do Easter and Valentine's Day and things like that. So you can pitch some themed update around those and you've got a good chance. But maybe there's some particular event they've got coming up, you know, classic summer sales or whatever like that. And if you can just make your update timed with that, then you've got that extra chance to get that extra featuring, and extra featuring means extra downloads, and extra downloads means extra revenue, et cetera, et cetera. So there's multiple. You want to do it often, but when you actually want to release it, you kind of want to make sure that both your existing audience knows it's coming, which is really, really satisfying for them and they stick around, but for your new players, when you can maximize the marketing bucks of it.
And so obviously being, you know, featured on a storefront by one of those kingmakers, I mean, the four of us up here, you know, have established games that have a track record. We have an account manager or someone that we can talk to. And unfortunately, the indies, the startups in the room don't have that ability. I suppose that's where I see the rise of things like, so on Steam, people are organizing all those fests. You know, so, hey, this week is the Made in New Zealand, you know, sale on Steam. That's probably the one piece of accessible pathway for an indie to try to get into one of those bundles. But already, say, in the Steam ecosystem, there's a lot of those now. So the value of those, I feel, has been eroded pretty quickly. But that's the only democratic option to try to bund together and get a bit of a store feature.
They're more democratic. I mean, the seasonal ones are still there. You know, you can, if you're tweaking your game icons and the discovery aspects like that, just to try and, you know, it's Valentine's Day, so everything's full of hearts. You know, it just gives you those tiny extra things.
Unfortunately, for the Steam ecosystem, so their seasonal sales, you know, so the spring sale, winter sale, and the like, I consider them business as usual now because everybody is in them. Everyone does the discount. You, as a rule of thumb, I've been sure anyone agrees or disagrees with me, if you discount 30%, you'll get double the revenue. And then you just have to do that every quarter as business as usual to meet what you did last year.
Yeah.
So there's no competitive advantage, certainly from those seasonal sales that everybody is in.
Yeah, I guess my point was that it's the competitive disadvantage of not doing it. So for the indie advice, it's just like, be aware that that is in. When you're planning your pricing, when you're planning your strategy, you know you're going to be doing that.
Yeah, so look, it is these sales, discounts, and events. That's where we get the lion's share of our revenue for the year. So, you know, Icarus being a daily deal this week, that will be Icarus's revenue for this quarter or this half year from that one spike, but on top of a okay long tail.
Fantastic. No, that's great. I think we've covered that pretty well. And I just want to bridge there. I mean, we talked about the content cadence, and obviously with Icarus and PC, that's probably less common. With mobile, it's obviously very important, as we talked about, to have that cadence. What sort of role, and it's probably particular for mobile, do you see for free content? I mean, you mentioned that before. I mean, how important is that to bring into the mix?
It's very important, is the short answer, because it increases the value of the product for people who haven't got into it. So this is that thing I was maybe interested in becomes more interesting. It rewards retention for those people who are in there, so they stay around more, the game feels more valuable, they're getting more exciting things to do. And in that multiplayer example, outside of operational costs, it gives more players, which means that your game stays alive longer. And I mean, this is the freemium, the free-to-play model fundamentally, is give away lots of stuff free and then people will start buying eventually, or 3% of them will. You've got to actually feed that 97% in order to take that 3%.
How do you approach that, Ben? Because obviously coming from a different world for that. Yeah.
Yeah, because we only do free content updates. So it's kind of similar to the last thing you were talking about, where content updates on a kind of smaller scope, so like a map update, if you will, is used for both kind of buoyancy in the platforms. We don't see it like move the needle as much, but it keeps us in recently updated algorithms, right? It keeps us refreshed. It keeps another reason to change the icons out, change the banners out, change the capsule art out. It gives us more media opportunities than anything. Things like showcases, we can participate because we're able to go, here's a new breaking news beat. So we get that exclusivity with a media beat. We participate in a showcase. We then get to double down on that with potentially a sale at that announcement. So nothing's actually in the game yet. It's just the promise of stuff coming up. And then we see performance based on that. But I mean, yeah, all of our content is free and it just keeps building the community. But in terms of like sales, it's more so for buoyancy than for creating giant spikes.
Yeah, which is for you. I mean, obviously you're keeping your price high, but it's keeping that word of mouth out there. Which for you as a marketer, I mean, I would be looking at that saying, well, great, operational costs. That's free marketing. That has a value for that free content. So it's not free; it's still earning you a reward, which is fantastic. That's awesome. All right, next thing I wanted to talk about just quickly. I think you mentioned, Stephen, you were talking about direct sales, and we just touched on that. Is that something you ever considered up front, or is that something that as a product matures, that it's something you're looking for next opportunities? I mean, what should somebody be thinking about?
It's the dream to be able to go direct and just, have such a fan base that you don't need to go via someone else's platforms. I mean, Steam is very dominant, but it is, if you have a niche product that people who are really passionate on, maybe you don't need to send them somewhere else if they are your community and your audience.
And have you put effort into that, particularly like chasing other platforms, Epic, things like that? I mean, do they still pull back to Steam, or is it something that you're exploring?
Well, again, it depends on their mindset. Yes, when they are bored and looking for something new and they don't know what they're looking for, yes, they'll go look at a warehouse, a smorgasbord to look for new ideas. But if they know what they want, and it's where we have it, then yes, they'll come to us. And as to, are we looking at doing anything about it ourselves? The answer is, watch this space.
That's a great answer. Anyone else on the panel? Is that something you've ever considered in thinking?
We've considered it. We've never pulled the pin and actually gotten over the line to do it. But we've come to the conclusion that the revenue gain is probably not the biggest motivation for us, because at our scale, the cost of running all the operations to do the direct sales would just eat up, say, the 30%. But the direct relationship with customers and being able to get feedback loops that are tighter with them would probably be the biggest benefit for us.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, all the platforms, we really don't know much about our player behind those black walls.
I mean, you can't even email your customers.
No, can't even. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah. So that direct relationship is really important, of course. So,
I shouldn't be so coy. I mean, I monopolize time, but I suppose the point I was making is, for the right type of game, for the right type of community, it would work. And so at the Rocketworks booth outside, we're demoing a space simulation game. We think it's a very particular niche audience. And the community is what's important. Join our Discord is probably just as important as buy the game in that case. So in that case, we've got a particular type of game, a particular audience where we think going direct really would work.
Okay, great. And that leads me to the next question. I was definitely going to ask about how important is maintaining that community, because obviously post-launch, we know how important it is. What role do they play in sort of shaping how you decide what you're doing with the longevity in terms of chasing revenue?
It's more than just chasing revenue. It's just everything. We're lucky enough to have a really good research team, and we do, as well as doing the sort of market research pre-launch, we have doing a lot of usability tests and user testing and surveying post-launch. It'd be nice to be able to email people directly, and we can't do that often for privacy reasons, but still being able to run surveys and get people to do that just can, at the simplest level, go, hey, we're considering one of these 3 features and each of them are going to take 6 months to build, but which one's going to give, we think we know what's going to work best. Let's find out from the audience what's going to work best. And just engaging them either on the social channels or whatever in that decision makes them excited about the things that are coming up. So you can get sort of the marketing bang for buck for doing it, as well as a little bit of insight into the right way of doing it. Plus, obviously, of course, we're doing all the usual bucket loads of analytics and other things where you're trying to interpret things from the data as well. But just getting out and asking them, it's pretty great.
They do like to tell you what they want.
Yes, they don't always know what
they don't always know what they want. No, that is a challenge of sort of deciphering that for sure. All right, no, that's fantastic. All right, I think we've talked through a pretty good journey here. It'd be great to ask each of you, I think individually, just if you're thinking about that life cycle and revenue growth, is there a tactic? Is there something that's really working for you now? Something you could give to the audience and say this is something you really consider?
I guess there's 2 things for us. One, which everyone's talked about, is actually planning this up front. I think when we very, very first started free to play, way back in, mists of time, we didn't. And then we were trying to work out how to sell and try to make, whatever, and crowbarring it in was just, you were making cents per user at that point. Now, when you plan it and you do that, you work out to events, it's not only are you making more money out of those people, but you're keeping them around longer, you're getting them engaged longer, and you're doing that. So that's in the planning. Probably the big other win for us is subscriptions, in the sense that when you've got users who are engaged in the game enough to get a subscription, more than a battle pass, but actually ongoing monthly subscription, that's really nice to just know that you've got that regular cushioning in your investment. And it's also something we've recently been doing is rewarding them by effectively giving them early access to certain features. They're only going out to subscribers. They're actually a bit more forgiving anyway of something which is effectively an early access feature because they're so invested in the game that they're a subscriber. And then they feel like they're getting extra value and they're contributing, and it becomes this virtuous cycle. So I think that is something we've already put quite a bit of investment into, and it's paying rewards. I think it's just something we're going to do more of.
Excellent. Subscription's another panel topic, I think, right? Just all on its own. But over to you, Ben.
Yeah, sweet. I think work with your production team, work with your other developers, and look at the kind of calendar that's coming up for your kind of roadmap of content, and looking at opportunities to turn a content update into a more of a marketing and media opportunity, and by that it kind of reverse engineers. So you're looking for these big showcases or big sales and seeing if you can fit those content things into those windows to help kind of maximize those opportunities where you get brand new eyes on the game and you can immediately go, hey, it's coming out next week, or it's out now, or there's a sale available, and you can go from awareness into conversion much quicker.
Awesome. All right. Excellent. And Stephen, and we're getting the roundup. We've got a minute or so. So
we've spoken a bit about DLC and launching them. You also have to really think about how it's going to be received as well, because there can be a backlash for your DLC as well. So we've essentially adopted what we call the paradox model, which is even if we're publishing a DLC, let's say about pets, at the same time, the base game is getting a free content update as well. So whether you're buying the DLC or not, you're getting some benefit at the same time. And that helps smooth those who have paid for it and those who have not.
excellent. And finally, Sam?
Yeah, we wound up doing that too. One thing we've found useful is to be really honest with discussions right up front about business model and about the implications of that and what could change in the future to change the business model. Because you can be working on a project that you intend to be premium, but if players want more content continuously, you should change. But it's something you have to have thought about beforehand and discussed with everyone involved in the project. And it can be a tough discussion, but it's very important.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Looks like we've just made it time. Thank you all. Been great discussion with you. I'm sure there's a lot of questions. I've got some new discussion topics, subscriptions we should probably talk about after this, but fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Please give a round of applause to everyone on the panel today. Thank you.